What is up, guys? Welcome back to the final video in this series. This is going to be the video on the advanced tips. So for players aiming for that top 10k, which is really difficult to do, and it's also going to be 5 tips that I'm going to be trying to stick to myself because I've never made it in the top 10k. So this is going to be my 5 tips in terms of strategy for myself as well. If you're aiming for something ambitious like the top 10k or even top 1k, then this is definitely the video for you. I've spent quite a bit of time putting thought into these tips, so hopefully they will pay off if so long as I can stick to them throughout the season. So with that said, let's just get stuck into the 5th tip. Okay, so for tip 5, I thought about this one for a little while, and I came to the conclusion that I think that for tip 5, I want it to be focused around knowing my team for week in, week out. What that means is I want it to be planned in advance. So if I was just look at the fixtures quickly, I want to know what my team is going to look like for game week 3 visually before I've even made my transfers. Now I know sometimes that can be a bit tricky because things can change in between game weeks. It's a very like adaptable game, FPL. Like, you have to kind of be on your toes and keep your ears out for injury news, for changes in formation and stuff like that. So it's not always easy to do that, but at the very least, I want to have my team planned out for each week, for at least for the fixture planning. So if I'm planning from fixtures 1 to 3 and then 4 to 7, I want to know what my team is going to look like in 1, 2, and 3. Before I even make any transfers, I want to know who I'm going to be captaining for those first 3 game weeks. And really, that's the kind of main tip that I'm starting off with. It is just planning those picks each week. So to start off with, I think the main pick that I want to be planning for if I was if I wasn't to plan my whole team, but I was just plan specifically little parts of it. The main one I want to plan is the captain. So for the first 3 game weeks, I want to be planning. I know it's going to be Salah for the first game week, bar form and injury and things staying the same. Probably going to be Salah for the second week as well. And then for game week 3, I will need to make up my mind on who I'm wanting to captain. It could be Son, it could be Fernandes, it could be Antonio, or it could be a Leicester player. So there's a few different options there, but that's really the plan for tip 5, is just to actually plan what team I'm going to be having for each week. I know for game week 3, for example, I may want to exchange potentially a City player, or if I've got a City player in for Norwich but I don't want them, I may want to exchange them out for someone else, or I may want to exchange a Liverpool player. It will need to be flexible, but for now it's just mainly planning and keeping that visual idea of what players can be playing week in, week out for the fixture durations that I'm planning. So for game week 1 to 3, I want to know what I'm planning, and for game week 4 to 7, I want to know exactly what my team is going to be. So that's tip 5. Tip 4 is mainly going to be about adapting to the trends in the season. So really, this is just going to be a case of keeping up to date with information. It's going to require a fair bit of time. It's going to be keeping up to date with formations, players coming in and out, little pieces of information here and there. I think most of the information is going to come from press conferences, because that's going to give you the best idea of little details here and there. But for example, when I say adapting to the trends in the season, it may mean that during the start of the season, maybe there's a lot of value in defenders, but then towards the Christmas period, maybe there's more value in forwards and midfielders. And really, it's just about keeping on my toes and making sure I don't get too settled in my way of thinking, and making sure that I keep on my toes in terms of the most up-to-date information. Now, equally, the downside of this can be that you can sometimes overthink and kind of like second guess yourself. So there will be, I will be keeping that in mind as well. That I don't want to overthink too many things. So really, it's just going to be a case of making sure that I'm making good decisions based on the information that's up to date. So yeah, like I say, press conferences, using the Reddit pages, using fan information, using previous match information, stats. That's really what it's going to do. I'm going to be adapting to trends using that information. Tip number 3 is going to be about focusing on specific weaknesses in teams and matching them up to specific strengths from other teams that they're playing. So for example, if Man City have got really good wingers like Sterling, or Mahrez, and they're facing a team who have got pretty bad fullbacks, then I will want to target those wingers for that specific game. This is actually a tip that I kind of talked a little bit about in my intermediates video, and which focused around spotting patterns and trying to find consistent patterns. But in the advanced tips, I wanted to focus on something very, very specific, and because this is going to really help in terms of choosing captains, and also for bringing players in who are going to get you quite a lot of points hauls, like your midfielders and your forwards. So in order to do that, you kind of have to really pinpoint the weaknesses in each team that they're playing and figure out if the strengths of that team that they're playing in are going to match up well to that team that they're playing. This is not necessarily a case of fixture difficult ratings on the websites. So, for example, like if I look at the fixtures, I wouldn't necessarily put loads of trust in these fixture difficult ratings. So if, for example, Sterling's not going to be playing for the first week, but if, for example, he was, and he's playing, say, for example, Tottenham, and he's up against Aurier, who is sometimes the right back, or Doherty, who's sometimes under the right back, I would say that's quite a good matchup because neither of them are particularly good right backs. Now, saying that, that's not always how tactics work. It's not always man for man. Sometimes Sterling may get doubled up on, he may even get tripled up on. So it may not necessarily be the case it may not necessarily be that that's always the case. So it's really a case of really kind of delving into a team and understanding how they're going to play tactically against each other, and figuring out or predicting how you think the game is going to go before you target that player. That has been something that I've discussed a few times amongst my other tip videos. So, but yeah, this is really going to be delving deep and looking at the very sort of pinpointing the weaknesses in teams and pinpointing the strengths in certain teams, rather than just looking at something like, for example, like home and away form. Okay, so tip 2 is going to be focusing on trying to predict the match outcome first. So this is again, this is something I've covered in previous videos, but I think this is really important in terms of figuring out which player is going to choose, because if you can predict the match outcome, the points for each player can kind of follow. Not always, because sometimes you may pick a player and that team will do really well, they score loads of goals, but your player isn't necessarily in the goals. Sometimes you can still get unlucky, or it just sometimes that's just the way the dice falls. So, but if you can't predict the match outcome regularly, then eventually the players that you pick will be more likely to get points. So, for example, I'm looking at game week 1, and I have a strong feeling that the match outcome for Norwich versus Liverpool will be something like both teams to score, and Liverpool will probably score more than 2 goals. Therefore, it makes it easy for me to predict that I should probably get their attacking players in my team. So like Salah, Jota, Trent Alexander-Arnold. If that match prediction is correct, then my players will naturally follow and score points. But if, for example, my match prediction is wrong and it turns out Norwich keep a clean sheet and they draw 0-0 or they win 1-0, then my player predictions will go horribly wrong. So with that said, I always think you should try and predict the match outcome first, because that's going to be a really big predictor as to whether your player will succeed. Now, there is a caveat to this, and there is sometimes exceptions where, regardless of the match outcome, let's say, for example, Chelsea versus Crystal Palace, let's say, for example, it's a 1-1 draw. If it is a 1-1 draw, that means pretty much a lot of different players from Chelsea could score. It may not necessarily mean that your player pick will score. So, but if they do, so say for example you picked Havertz and the score is 1-1, in hindsight that will seem like a good pick if Havertz scores. But beforehand, if someone was to tell you that the score will be 1-1, you wouldn't necessarily pick Havertz, because someone else could score. Werner could score, Ziyech could score, Alonso could score, Mount could score. There could be a lot of different varieties. So in that case, it may depend more on, again, tactics of the team and form of the player, and not necessarily match outcome. But I still think over the course of the season, this sort of prediction is very important, predicting the match outcome. I'd say like 60 to 70% of the time, it will benefit you rather than hinder you. So I would focus on trying to predict the match outcome. Ways you can do this are, again, trying to understand the tactics of how the football team plays, listening to fans of that team and people who specialise in watching that specific team, you know, getting as much information about how that team plays and how their players are playing and form and you know, up-to-date information, that's going to help you make better match predictions as well, which will in turn help you make better player predictions. Okay, so my number one tip for myself especially, and this is going to be something I'm going to try to do over the course of the season, because I know for a fact it will definitely help me play fantasy football better. And that tip is going to be watch as much football as I can. Now that's not always practical because you know, if you want to be really good at fantasy football, you're going to have to watch pretty much every match if you want to get really good at it and get in the top 1k or 10k, which, you know, you can't be watching over, you know, 10 hours of football a weekend or a week. It's just not practical. But if you do have the time to do that, that is the tip that I would give you if you want to score really well. You just got to simply watch more football matches. And if you are looking to watch more football matches, but you don't want to watch that many, you don't want to watch every single game, just pick a few teams who you're quite interested in, who you think might be useful for fantasy football, and just watch their matches, because that sometimes can be enough. The alternative is, and in an ideal world, this is maybe something I look at doing in future, is just to simply communicate and work as a team with people who are specialists in specific teams. So say, for example, if you get in contact with a Brentford fan who's watching their team play week in, week out, they know the players really well, they know the manager, they know the play style really well, and they know all the inside little details. Working together with that person can really help you make better decisions on Brentford without having to watch the games yourself. So alternatively, you can go about it that way and get information from other people who are specialists on their team. Or if you just want to, you can watch Brentford play yourself and make up your own decisions. But either way, the more football you watch, the better decisions you will make, because eventually you will just, even if it's not a conscious thing, if it's a subconscious thing, you will start to pick up little things about which players are getting into the box, which players are not getting on the score sheet but look like they're really threatening. Now, a lot of people just use stats to kind of figure these things out, but stats don't always paint the full picture. You know, sometimes in order to paint the full picture, you have to kind of watch the game, and that's really where you can get the most value out of the information, is by watching yourself and learning yourself, rather than just depending on the stats. So I hope that's been useful to you, those top 5 advanced tips. Hopefully, if I stick to those tips, it will mean that I will score in the top 10k this season. That's not going to be easy to do, no doubt. But I'm confident with these tips that it will work. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to be doing quite a few videos this week. I'm going to be focusing on helping people with their rating their teams. I'm going to be focusing on some specific player picks, because now we've got the very much up-to-date information that we possibly can. I think it's more relevant to pick players now. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know, and I hope you look forward to the videos I've got coming up. Take care.